October 14th, 1943. 5,000 feet above the Belgian border, the morning sky wasn't sky at all. It was a swirling battlefield of vapor trails, flak bursts, and burning engines. Flight Sergeant Jack Merrill, a lanky 22-year-old from Pine Ridge, Colorado, gripped the controls of his P-38 Lightning, the twin-engined fighter trembling like a nervous animal beneath him. His gloves were slick with sweat. His heartbeat pounded louder than the engines. He was on his second combat mission, but it might as well have been his first. Nothing in training prepared him for the chaos of real war. Below him, a bomber formation struggled to hold shape while waves of Focke-Wulf 190s tore ragged holes through the sky. Jack spotted one, FW-190, break away from the melee, cutting low toward a damaged B-24 at the edge of the formation. The big bomber trailed smoke, limping, bleeding. His radio crackled with the calm, practiced voice of his squadron leader. "Stay tight. No hero runs. Maintain formation." But Jack wasn't built for staying tight. He had grown up riding wild horses through the Rockies, outrunning thunderstorms, and testing how close he could skate along the frozen lake before the ice cracked. Fear was familiar to him, but it never stopped him. It challenged him. So when that German fighter angled in on the wounded bomber, Jack didn't hesitate. He shoved the throttle forward and broke formation. His leader shouted through the radio, furious. Jack ignored it. His world narrowed to one target, one kill, that one chance to save the crew trapped inside the limping B-24. The lightning roared as Jack dove, twin booms screaming through the air. The 190 never saw the American coming. Jack lined him up, steadied his breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The Lightning's nose guns spat pure fire. The 190's wings snapped apart. The fuselage burst into flames, and the pilot bailed too late. The burning aircraft fell like a meteor, pieces scattering across the Belgian fields. Jack pulled up hard, breath ragged, eyes burning from adrenaline. His canopy was smeared with oil from the dying German fighter. He could barely see. Below him the bomber he saved rocked its wings in thanks. When Jack limped back to base, fuel almost gone, canopy streaked black, and his gun barrels smoking, the ground crew stared. He looked like a man who had flown through hell and somehow come out the other side. That night, the senior officers reviewed his gun camera. Grainy film flickered, showing the single burst that ended the German fighter in a fireball. The room went silent. On only his second mission, Jack Merrill, quiet, stubborn Jack, had done the impossible. He'd carved his name into the war. In the months that followed, his legend grew. Jack flew like nature itself, fast, unpredictable, unstoppable. His P-38 seemed an extension of his body. While others followed orders like scripture, Jack followed instinct. He flew low enough to scrape treetops, high enough to kiss the edge of the stratosphere. His squadron adored him. His commanders tolerated him. The Germans feared him. But the man behind the goggles was more complicated. Jack had grown up fatherless, raised by a mother who worked double shifts in a dusty Colorado diner. The boy who learned to fix old tractors with bare hands became the young man who boxed in barnyards, wrestled cattle, and dreamed of something beyond the silent mountains. He never wanted medals, never wanted glory. He just wanted to fly. By early 1944, Jack had 17 confirmed kills, an ace many times over. But he carried each loss from his squadron like stones in his pockets. He was reckless, they said, untamable, a storm disguised as a pilot, and storms don't last forever. March 3rd, 1944. The mission was simple, on paper. Escort bombers deep into Germany, then home. But nothing was simple in that war. Heavy clouds hung low, visibility was terrible. Half the squadron became separated on climb-out. Jack found himself alone with only 2 wingmen when a massive swarm of German fighters rose to meet them. The sky erupted. "Break! Break!" voices screamed in his headset. Jack's instincts took over. He dove, rolled, twisted, firing at shapes appearing and vanishing in bursts of cloud. One enemy fighter spiraled down, trailing smoke. Then another. But Jack's own aircraft was bleeding now, holes in the left boom, warning lights flickering. He could disengage. He could run. But he saw them. 3 German fighters closing in on a crippled American B-17. Engines coughing black smoke. Jack Merrill didn't think. He never did. He rammed the throttle forward and charged. His wingmen yelled for him to stop. He didn't. He cut across the enemy, guns blazing, drawing all 3 onto him. His lightning shuddered under the hits. He kept firing anyway, kept pushing, kept fighting. He scored 1 more kill. A second, the third broke off, but Jack's own aircraft was mortally wounded. Smoke poured from the engines. The left propeller locked. The lightning dropped, struggling to hold the sky. Jack tried to climb, tried to level. The plane didn't respond. It rolled once, twice, then slipped into a final silent dive through the clouds, disappearing behind a snow-covered ridge near Bad Hersfeld. The explosion echoed for miles. Jack Merrill was 22. He never made it home. His squadron held a quiet memorial beside the runway, the wind cold and sharp. Someone painted his name on the briefing room wall. His empty bunk remained untouched for weeks. And the bomber crew he saved that day, all 10 men survived. Years later, an old pilot who had flown with Jack said, "He wasn't the kind of man you could control. He was the kind you thanked God was on your side. Jack didn't fly for medals, he flew for people, and in this war, that made him rare." Jack Merrill never followed rules. He followed courage, and courage made him a legend. The sea around New Britain shimmered like molten glass as the sun rose over Rabaul, the fortress city Japan once believed unbreakable. From above, it looked peaceful. Jungle-draped ridges, smoking volcanoes, pristine blue water. But for the pilots stationed there in 1944, Rabaul was no paradise. It was a trap. Supplies had dwindled to a trickle. American bombers circled like vultures, and every flight could be their last. Among the scattered revetments and cratered runways rested a machine that symbolized both pride and despair. The Mitsubishi A6M, once the terror of the Pacific, now a relic fighting against time, technology, and overwhelming odds. Mechanics worked with hands stained by oil and exhaustion, cannibalizing wrecks to keep a handful of Zeros barely airworthy. Every bolt, every scrap of aluminum was precious. Standing beside one battered fighter was Flight Petty Officer Saburo Minato, a man who had trained in the golden age of Japanese naval aviation. When pilots were gods, the Zero was untouchable, and Japan's empire seemed destined to swallow half of Asia. But now, Minato watched American F-6F Hellcats carve the skies with ease, their armor thick and engines powerful, while the Zero remained dangerously light, fragile, and hopelessly outclassed. He ran his hand along the wing, feeling the patched skin beneath his palm. This aircraft had been his partner for almost 2 years, Together they had survived Guadalcanal, the Bismarck Sea, the anti-shipping strikes that turned the Solomon Islands red. But now, every time he strapped in, he wondered if this would be the sortie where his luck finally snapped. A distant rumble reached the airfield. Low, thunderous, unmistakable. American bombers. The ground crew looked up in dread. Black dots appeared over the horizon, growing larger with every heartbeat. Rabaul was about to face another hammering. Minato didn't wait for orders. He sprinted to the cockpit, kicking aside empty fuel drums and shells. The Zero's engine coughed to life with a sickly rasp, belching smoke before settling into a high-pitched whine. The runway shook as the first wave of B-25s unleashed their bombs on the outskirts of the base dirt, and debris blasted into the sky. With a final glance at the burning jungle, Minato shoved the throttle forward. The Zero lifted, graceful even in its decay, cutting through rising smoke like a pale ghost. Around him, a handful of other Zeros clawed upward, each carrying pilots who knew they were flying into an uneven fight. Above the clouds, Hellcats awaited them. The clash was instantaneous and violent. Minato rolled hard left, narrowly dodging a burst of .50 caliber fire that shredded the air where he had been seconds earlier. He pulled the Zero into a tight spiral, its one advantage still intact, unmatched agility. For a brief moment, he was behind a Hellcat, the crosshairs lining up perfectly. He fired. The 20mm cannons spat flame, and the American fighter shuddered, smoke trailing from its wing. Minato's heart surged. The Zero still had fangs, but victory was fleeting. More Hellcats dropped in from above, diving with terrifying speed. Minato felt rounds tear through his fuselage, the engines screaming in protest. He tried to climb, to bank, to escape, but the Zero didn't respond like it used to. Age, wear, and battle damage had finally caught up with it. A final burst struck the tail. The aircraft jolted violently. Fire curled around the engine cowling. Minato knew instantly he would not be landing this plane. As the world blurred into smoke and sky, he opened his canopy. The wind whipped at his face as he prepared to throw himself into the void. He looked once more at the wings of his beloved aircraft, the craft that had carried him across half the Pacific. Through triumph and disaster he whispered a thank you. Then he bailed out. The Zero plunged into the jungle below, a streak of fire swallowed by the green canopy. Minato's parachute blossomed above him like a lonely white flower. Below, Rabaul burned. Above, the last defenders of an empire fought battles they couldn't win with machines that should have been retired years ago. The era of the Zero, the symbol of Japan's early war dominance, was ending. And every pilot still flying, one knew they were writing the final lines of a legend. But as long as even one Zero took to the sky, the spirit of the Fox of Rabaul refused to die.